What is going on, you guys? So, just to remind you where we left off, let's see. So last time we were able to connect to the Twitter API, but it was a little ugly. Everything was kind of mixed together. We defined what is a tweet. We contacted the Twitter API. We saved data in the database, and we had a bunch of strings, all within the same code. And so let's take a look at that. Edit. So we're doing a lot here within this code. So this is the main function that we used to ask the Twitter API for Paul Graham's tweets. And so we've got strings. We're defining our tweet here. We're saying we have all this in the same file, and we're talking to our database, and we have more strings here. So we've got a lot of stuff going on all in the same place. So our goal today is to kind of separate all these things out, and the goal of that is to make it a little bit easier to reason about, like what is this file doing? If I open this file and someone asks me, hey, what is Twitter API.py doing? I would have to say, it's doing a lot of stuff. It's defining what a tweet is. It's hard coding all the strings that we need. It's talking to the Twitter API. It's saving tweets to a database. So it's doing a lot of stuff, and that makes it hard to maintain. So like 6 months from now, I don't even think I could I would need to take some time and figure out what is this code doing. And so the goal is to write code so that we can come back to it in 6 months and pick up really quickly and not have any delay in making significant progress again. So our goal today is to split up all these different concerns into their own files. So we'll do it one piece at a time. So the easiest would be to pull out the tweet. So we don't need to, we can make, and let me remind you what the so this is our folder currently. Everything's kind of mingled together. We got the authorization stuff here, this get bearer token, and the credentials. We've got all the stuff that we mentioned in Twitter API.py. We've got our plan for winning this developer job. Let's keep in mind that is the overall plan. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So first things first, let's separate out our planning documents, our example JSON data. Let's separate that out from the code that's doing the heavy lifting. So let's make a directory with parents called source auth. So let's see what that did. So we made this folder source in a subfolder called auth. And so in auth, we want to put in all of our authentication stuff. So credentials and get bearer token, we'll stick that into auth. So move credentials and get bearer token to source auth. So let's see what that did. So you see we just moved these down here into auth. So next thing we're going to do, let's take a look at twitter.py. So the first thing, I think the easiest thing to do is just pull out defining a tweet and give this its own file. So we'll say, create a vertical split. We're going to call this source tweet.py. So we're just going to define what is a tweet in here. So let's grab this stuff and let's grab its relevant imports. Okay, do we need anything else? Yes, we do. Column. Let's grab that. Okay, so column string. Okay, looks like we're just doing column and string. Okay. All right. We can test that this is working with a little. We can use this if main guy. Let's grab that. So test, make a tweet. I'm going to say has an ID of 1, text my tweet, and an author me. Okay, so let's just print it out and see what happens. So what should happen is it should call the repr function and print something like this. So let's save that. Let's call it. Uh-oh. That's because we didn't set up the init file. So do we need that? Not necessarily. Okay, let's keep that in mind, but let's come back to it. So we might not need that. So it's not. Let's try and okay, so yeah, so we declare a SQL Alchemy class in a specific way. So I'm not sure if creating an init function. An init function is what gets called as soon as you create a new instance. So when we do this right here, we're creating an instance of tweet. And if it had an init function, it would automatically get called. So I'm not sure if that would mess it up. Okay, so we'll come back to that. Keep that in mind. Okay, what else? So we made these examples. We don't need these. That was just to see how everything is working. Okay. Okay. And I also like to put the main function on top, and so we can kind of read down. So you see we call the startDB function here. So I like to put that underneath the function it's being called in. So let's just move this down. Let's see. Let's stick that at 30. Okay. And so we can check that this is still working. So what's going to happen if we call main, it's going to send this URL asking for Paul G's tweets. So let's see what happens. We get this URL. It pulls out the credentials. Okay, so we need to update this. What else do we need? Okay. We need to import our tweet. Let's take a look. Okay, so tweet is down here in our source code, and Twitter API is up here. So we're going to do two things. We're going to rename Twitter API to Twitter search. So we're going to have two functions, two classes. We're going to have a tweet class and a Twitter search class. So we're going to move Twitter API to source Twitter search.py. Okay. cd source tree. Okay. So we've got our authentication stuff in here. So we need to import tweet in order to be able to call the tweet class, and we need to import credentials in order to grab the bearer token. So let's do that within Twitter search and Twitter search. Okay, so, and in this case, you see we're importing credentials, but credentials is a sub-package within auth. So we need to import auth.credentials. Okay. Auth.credentials. And there's one other thing that we need to do before we get this to compile correctly. And I'll show you the error that makes. Okay, so we got a couple invalid syntaxes. Okay, so we need to update. We can't have invalid Python code, and so that's going to be the first error. So we're going to have a bunch of errors, but eventually it's going to show the import error for credentials. So let's fix it as they come to us. So we'll fix the credential error first. Okay. Just give a little placeholder, so that's valid Python code. Okay. Let's run this again. So we'll get the next error now. Okay. Yeah, so credentials is not defined. So let's fix these errors one by one as they come up. So we're going to go to line 10. Line 10, credentials, and we want auth.credentials.bearer token. So there's going to be another error, but we're going to keep moving on. Keep knocking this out here. Okay, key error data. That's because response JSON. So we called the response. We sent a get request, but the bearer token is just an empty string. So Twitter's not going to give us anything with an empty string. Okay, and so that's why that didn't work there. But that shows you that we're now successfully importing auth.credentials. That's interesting. Are we doing that? So here's something. Import PDB, pdb.setTrace. So this allows us to put a breakpoint in our code, and so we can see what does headers look like at this point. Let's check that out. Twitter search. Okay. We want to print headers. Okay, interesting. So it looks like it's successfully pulling that empty string from credentials.py. That's interesting. Okay. All right. Next, what do we want to do? We want to import tweet. Okay, let's see what happens. Nope. So we got an error in tweet.py. Interesting. What's the error here? Print test. So let's test this out. Tweet. Let's make this a little easier to call. User bin and Python. Python 3. chmod plus x tweet. Oops. I think that might be the issue. Okay, so interesting. That works. Does this work? Yeah, so we don't have an init .py. Well, let's try it out. See what happens. Self is going to take an ID. don't think that's right. I'm trying to think about why. Okay, so we want to be able to set the values of the tweet class. Question is, does that mean we need to give it an init class? I think it does. Let's try it. Our goal is to try and, so we have to successfully run this code right here. Okay. That's interesting. Let's see how they were doing it here. So they have a class. They have no init function. So how do you create a user? Create an instance. So it looks like they're able to create an instance, and yet there's no init function. Oh, okay. Okay, so SQL Alchemy, it creates an init method for you when it runs this code. So there's an implied init method, and that's why you're able to set this instance. We're not able to do it in our code because we haven't run. What haven't we run? We haven't created the engine, I'm assuming. Create all. So I assume once the data is created, or the table is created in Postgres, that implicit init function will have been created, and that will allow us to initialize an instance of the tweet class. That's interesting. Okay, so let's come back to that. So we don't need this. This right now isn't working, but I think we're eventually going to get it to work. Okay. Let's try running the Twitter search and see if that successfully makes this tweet here. So we're going to do patio 11. Patio 11. Patio 11. We're going to try and pull his tweets just to see if we can get this working. And then we also have to reset up our auth, because I deleted those. Oops. cd auth. Let's do vim auth credentials. Yeah, so we need to redo this. That's okay. And the reason I deleted those is because you don't want to have your API keys open to the public, especially if you're a paying customer, because then someone can, like, you'd be paying for someone else to use your account, so you don't want to do that. I'm not a paying customer, but I still want to use my quota to do something cool. Yeah, so keep that in mind. You don't want to give your API keys out. So let's find our API keys here. Twitter developer portal. Okay. So I want to grab our keys. View our keys. Okay. We have to regenerate our bearer token. Get a little practice redoing this. So let's see, Vim, let's remind ourselves, get bearer token. Okay, and so we don't need that. And we just want to print our bearer token. We're going to do an F string. So we're just going to print our bearer token, and then we can save that to our credentials folder. Okay, so we're going to do Python 3, and we can go ahead and make it executable just to make it a little easier to run. Auth get bearer token. And we gotta add this little shebang line. That's what, kind of a funny name. That's what it's called, shebang. User bin env Python 3. Okay, so we're gonna run auth get bearer token, and we want to save the output. So you do a double greater than to append. We're gonna append that to auth credentials. Okay, and let's check that. Auth credentials. Okay, cool. So that's how we make our bearer token. So now let's try running Twitter search. Huh. So there's an issue with importing tweet. Module object is not callable. Okay. So SQL Alchemy makes an implied init method. We have not made that yet. So the question is, how do we trigger that? Okay. Let me think about this. I'm gonna pour some coffee. Yeah, it's important to not make big changes, like change like 10 things, and then try and test it, because when it goes wrong, you have 10 different options of why it went wrong. So it's good to make a small change and test, because that way you have a better idea about what's going wrong. So we've pulled out the tweet. We've pulled out the tweet into its own its own file, and so that's causing an error. So now we can let's try and get it to run successfully. So let's put the tweet class back inside Twitter search and see if we can get that to run correctly. And then we'll figure out how we can pull it out. Okay. Be Twitter search, edit Twitter search. Okay. Okay, so we're going to copy this. Yank. We're going to put it back in here. For now, we're going to comment this out. So we made a couple changes, right? We made the source file, we made the auth file, we pulled tweet out. So we've done multiple things, and we haven't tested each one individually. So that's a mistake. So let's put the two class back in here and see if we can get this to run. Okay. Okay, so it runs successfully here. Cool. Oh look, that's me. Ah, that's my. So I asked Patio 11. I asked him a question. He responded, and so it's pulling his response to me. That's pretty funny. Okay. And so now let's just check. Let's see, did that get saved to the database? So let's open up the database. And let's select count star from tweets where author equals Patio 11. Okay, yeah, so that successfully put everything into the database. So that's good. So now, let's see. We can run it together. Now how do we pull it out? That's the next step. Let's do one thing at a time. Okay. Let's delete this again. What can we do? Tweet. Tweet. Twitter search. Delete that. So what can we do to get this to run? So I think we might need to add an init file, which tells Python that we can import from within this source file. Let's try that. So let's see what that did. So we created init.py. Okay, let's try that. Nope, that didn't do it. So let's run through this and see what's going on here. So does a GET request, starts a DB session, which it creates the engine. Okay. Go back to that tutorial and see what is going on there. Let's look for that init. Okay. So it looks like we could explicitly give an init function, and that will override the default method. But then the question is, will it create the table correctly with the correct columns? How do we do that? So does our tweet class look like that? Because this is a string. So I believe this needs to be coupled with the create engine. The implicit init method is made after the create all. Okay. So what if we import tweet after the engine is created? What if this goes right here? Will that work? No. What if we put this here after the session is created? So it has to do with the order of operations. So when they create all here, then they're able, it looks like that create all, once it creates the tables in the database, it's also making this implicit init method. So let's just make our own init method. Let's try that. Tweet. So we're going to make an init method. Def. So how do we do that? Like here they're assigning it to a column, but what if we want to assign it like, so we're just saying, well, we can just try. We can try. Okay. We want to do insert What if we do that? This is going to take self ID string yeah, how do we assign a value? Text string, author string. So let's look, how do we make init method SQL alchemy? Wow, so in this case, bar is not associated with the foo class at all. Okay. So when we create a class, you can create multiple instances of that class. You can create, so we have a tweet class, and we can make many tweet objects, like one tweet from Paul Graham and one tweet from Patio 11. So instance methods within the init function, like they might apply to, like, one tweet object from Patio 11 has one kind of text, and the tweet attribute for a Paul G tweet has a different text. That's interesting. So when you do this, this applies to all classes, or all, wait, what does it say? Interesting. Yeah, so the difference here is class attributes and instance attributes. Instance attributes can differ between instances. A class attribute is the same for all instances. Interesting. So we can do what that means. Do that, and then do this. self, ID string, text string, author string. Okay, so let's see if this works. Okay, so that works now. So we've just this code is for SQL Alchemy to create a table within Postgres, and then this code we're just doing the explicit init method. I think this is the easiest thing for now. Okay, let's see what happens. So that means we don't need init.py. Let's not create a bunch of changes here. Okay. Let's remind ourselves what our current structure looks like. Okay. And now we want to run this. Let's see what happens here. Twitter search. Module object is not callable. That's weird, right? Because we did call it. We called it here with our dummy tweet. Maybe we do need that init.py. Nope. Huh. So tweet works. We can create a tweet from the class here, but we're having some issues creating it here. It's strange, right? Let's see if this is pulling correctly. Import PDB. Print headers. Okay, so that's working. The question is, why can't we create a tweet? This is the problem here. We're not able to create a tweet right now. Do we need these, maybe? Nope. Module object not callable. Module object is not callable. Oh my gosh. Okay, I know why. Man, don't be afraid to go to Stack Overflow. Okay, so when we say tweet here, we're referring to the top level, to the file tweet.py. If we want to refer to the class, we have to go from tweet, import tweet, or just do tweet.tweet. So this will work, I think. Let's check. Oh. Keyword argument ID. Huh? Is that going to work? Okay, so for the most part it worked. Because we got the same tweets, because we already grabbed Patio 11's tweets, and so we did it again, and so we tried to double insert those tweets, and so that's why it gave us this duplicate key violates. Yeah, but that worked, guys. So we just got rid of, we were saying ID equals, yeah, that wasn't necessary. Okay. Yeah, just going like that. Cool. Cool, guys. All right. Now, so we've made our tweet class, and now we want to, and the key sticking point was making the init function. We weren't able to figure out how to work with the implicit init function, so we just made an explicit one. Now let's make a Twitter search class. And that should be a little bit easier to reason about things. Like, we can pull all these strings together, so they're not going to be all over the place. There's just a lot going on in all the functions, and so it's hard to reason about what's going on. So we're going to make a class. It's going to be Twitter search. We're going to make an init function. Yeah. Okay. So let's try and pull these strings out of here. Connection string. URL. Okay. So each search has some tweets associated with it. So let's make that. So this is like get Twitter response. Oops. So how do we, let's do the work to set the tweets within this Twitter search instance. Okay, so we've got a response. Let's set the tweets to self.get tweets. Def, what is going on there? Def get tweets self. Okay. Alright, so this is why we kept that example data. So now we can just look at the example data. So let's cat example data. Okay, so how do we pull out the tweets? We have to call this data key. And then the data key will give us a list of tweet objects. Cool. So tweet objects is equal to data. And now how do we set the tweets? Something get tweets. Tweets. Let's just do what ones that get called though. Tweets equals empty string, and then we'll do this. Do that, then we'll return tweets. Okay. Okay. Response equals this. If so, we might not get a successful response, so we want to handle that whenever, like, we're not able to successfully, like, we call Twitter and Twitter doesn't pick up the phone, so we want to know if that happens or not. So if response dot status code does not equal 200, raise exception. Okay. So 200 is a successful call, and like 400 values are unsuccessful. All right. So once we got the tweets, we need to save the tweets. That's what this stuff here is doing. So how do we want to handle this? Start DB session. We could make a new, we could pull out the, we could make a new file that deals with saving the info to the database. A Twitter search doesn't really have anything to do with a Postgres, so that would make sense. We can make a Postgres persist file. I think that kind of makes sense. Like a URL doesn't have anything to do with a connection string or headers. Well, first let's get it working, and then we can try and think about pulling out the Postgres related stuff, SQL Alchemy stuff. Okay, so we don't need that. Oh. Okay. Right, let's see if this is working. Let's do Twitter search. It's going to call get tweets. Okay, so we want this to be underneath. It's going to call get tweets in the init function, which is going to send the call to the Twitter API. So this should work. We should be able to print the tweets. So let's do test equals Twitter search for tweet in test.tweets. Print tweet. Let's do that. Uh-oh. Get Twitter response. Why is that not defined? What? It's not defined. Interesting. Not really sure what that error is. What if we do this? Let's get it to work together, and then we can separate it. Does that work? That works. Okay. Now how do we separate this out? Get tweets. We do like, it is nice to raise an exception when, to know when, like, we're unable to communicate with the Twitter API. That's the point of pulling that part out of there. And sending a GET request versus building tweet objects. Those are two different things, so it's nice to have two separate functions doing those two things. We can say get Twitter response JSON. We can send the JSON here. Let's see if that works. It's nice to be explicit with what's going on, so makes sense. Okay, let's try that. That's really strange. Oh, I know. Self. Oh man. I believe that's gonna work. Yeah, okay. That's funny. Yeah, so when you call one of these instance methods, so that's a method is a function for a class. So this is an instance method. You need to use the self dot beforehand. Excuse me. Okay. So we've got Twitter search working. Now let's make sure it's saving the tweets. We can just do self.save tweets. Okay. How do we save the tweets? Def save tweets. Self. Start DB session. For tweet in self.tweets. Add the tweet, commit them, print them out, and then we'll close the session. Let's see if that works. Uh-oh. Same problem we had last time. 45 self.start DB session. 58 self See if that works. Connection string is not defined. Self.connection string. Self. Let's see. Boom, guys. So we can disregard this because we've already, like if we called a new screen name that we haven't already scraped, then this would work fine. So that's cool. So we could, if we wanted to, we could create a new class like Postgres save, and we could call that class kind of makes sense. Make a save tweets class. So let's say sometime you wanted to switch from a Postgres database to MongoDB. You would have to remember that, oh, I saved all the database stuff inside the Twitter search class. That, like 6 months from now, you might not remember that. And so that's a reason to create like a save tweets class. So if we create a save tweets class, you know, oh, 6 months from now, we want to switch to a MongoDB instead of Postgres. Oh, well, I'll check inside the save tweets, the save tweets.py file. Whereas otherwise, you'd have to search and hopefully find it within Twitter search. I think that would be the reason why. That's a good reason why we should create a save tweets class. Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. All right, we're gonna edit save tweets.py class save tweets. Def init self right buffer Twitter search vertical split save tweets. Okay, so we want to move the connection string. Everything related to saving we want to move in here. Connection string, save tweets, put that in there. We want to move this stuff. It's going to get some tweets. So what we could do, we could do test equals Twitter search. Search equals Twitter search. Test save tweets is save tweets. We're going to give it search.tweets, right? Because we set this self.tweets equal to a list of all the tweets. Okay. So if we can get this to run, then this should work. Go like that a little bit. Make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. Okay, move my head. Okay. So we need to get all the related stuff. So there's no like session maker. That's just on the other side. Create engine. Yeah, that's over there. Let's move all this stuff out of there. And then column, I don't think we need that. That's from the tweets. Declarative base, nope, don't need that. Session maker and create engine. Okay, cool. Self.tweets equals tweets. Okay, I think that's going to work. What if we do... Okay, so if this works, we should get it to print out the ID and the text. So let's do this. User bin env Python 3 chmod plus x save tweets. Let's call save tweets. Oh, we have to import Twitter search. Oh, nope. Okay, and so Twitter search, this refers to Twitter search.py. So refer to the class, we have to do 2 of them like that. 1, 2, boom, boom. Okay. Yes, guys, all right. So we have done it. So we started off, we had everything together, right? We were saving tweets together, we were calling the Twitter API, and we were defining what is a tweet all together, and we had strings everywhere, right? So now we've separated these things out, right? Now we've got a Twitter search class, we've got a save tweets class, and we've got a tweets class, and all of these strings, they're in one specific place, right? Like all these strings are on top. So we're not just running around looking for different strings that we need to change. We know right where to look for them. So this is going to make it much easier, like 6 months from now. If we want to switch out Postgres for MongoDB, you know what? We can just go to the save tweets.py file, because that's probably where we're going to have our database logic, and we can just drop in a MongoDB connection string instead. There we go, guys. So we have refactored our ugly Twitter API code. So the first goal was just to write some code to get it to work. Next, we made it pretty. We separated out all these different concerns. So it's going to make it much more likely that 6 months from now, we can come back to this code and like figure out what was going on, or switch out a database. Yeah, so this is just a lot better code. Yeah, thanks for watching, and go ahead and leave any comments below, and I'll be responding to the first few people. So, all right, you guys, thank you. See you next time.